Perfect. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here, and really enjoyed Shlomo's intro to a lot of the topics that we're going to be talking about today, and excited to have Mark here. And I won't fall off the chair, I promise. I'll try not, but it's really high up here, especially once you put the lights on. A little afraid of heights, but I think I'll motor through. So thanks again for being here. We're going to talk through a range of topics in the next 45 minutes or so. This is really designed to be kind of more of an informal fireside chat type of a discussion. We'll talk a little bit, set up the content of what we're going to be talking through. And I also want to invite you not only to participate through the polling question that we'll get to in a moment, but also to participate with any questions that you might have for myself or for Mark as we go through. And feel free to raise your hand, and we have a microphone that we can get to you, or if you're close, you can shout it out as well after you raise your hand and I call on you. So I'm Amy Connery. I know I've met some of you, but for those of you who I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I am with a market research firm called IDC. And the practice area that I run is software business models and monetization. I've launched this practice in 2004, have run this for many years. Prior to that, I launched and ran our software as a service and cloud forecast in 1999, and I'm still manage that practice as well. So my perspective is really, as someone who's worked really closely with companies as they've made a shift either from a business model perspective, I'm shifting my business model from a product-centric SKU approach to more of a cloud-centric services approach, or also working with our enterprise customers and helping them figure out how do they make a shift from buying products and services in a different way, and how might some approaches work better in certain circumstances, and how do they need to think about their relationships with their providers and how they change if they start to shift from purchasing products to purchasing services or software as a service or cloud. So that's really my area of focus, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Mark as well, and I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself in a moment. But before we do that, I do want to kind of ask from a polling perspective. Our focus of this discussion is going to be increasing focus on software monetization. So what I'd like to understand from the folks in the audience, the top reason your organization, assuming that you are increasing your focus on software monetization. And if you are not increasing your focus or not changing business models, you can certainly answer that you're not doing that. That's one of the multiple choice options. But these are some of the more common reasons that I hear companies looking to shift to software monetization, or maybe not entirely shift, but also look at opportunities for monetizing software alongside the more traditional monetization models for products or professional services that they might have within their organizations. And you can see, I don't know how the poll closes because it's kind of fun to see it moving in real time, but flexible business models obviously looks like it's a clear, big, important driver for folks. And we'll talk a little bit about flexibility and customer experience in the next few minutes as well as some of the different business models that are enabled by monetization shifts, the types of metrics and things like that you might consider. Responding to customer needs, also something that we hear a lot. The importance of services and new business models, and that could imply cloud services. It could imply closer relationships with your customers through the types of services that you provide with customers. A small percentage of you guys are not looking to change business models, which would make sense given that we're in a room talking about business models. So I'm guessing that the majority of you are making some sort of a change, but maybe for those of you that aren't, you're looking to improve what you have and to make it perhaps more customer experience friendly. So what I want to talk about before I get to turning over to Mark are some of the reasons why companies might be looking at software monetization. And we kind of addressed that in the polling slide, and why now. Shlomo addressed that quite a bit in his presentation. I think that the idea of flexible business models and software monetization are obviously things that we've been talking about for a while in the industry. I think there have been some leading edge firms pushing that forward within their organizations. But these are difficult transitions to make. And I think what's really changed in part has been the customer really an interest in new ways of interacting with providers, new ways of getting access to products and services. And now that we kind of have a 360-degree push and pull, both from customers, from partners, from investors, as well as maybe internal for a variety of reasons. And commoditization was something in the polling slide as well that we hear people talking about. This is a trend that's really moving forward and accelerating. So Mark, just want to give you a moment to introduce yourself and your role at Juniper and maybe what you're seeing as far as the importance of software monetization to Juniper's strategy.
So thanks, Amy. So Mark Siri, Senior Director of Strategy and Corporate Development. I lead an initiative at Juniper Networks, who's a networking equipment company that delivers best-of-breed routing, switching, and security offerings. And I lead an effort to augment the core portfolio with software products and the core business models with software business models. And it's a company-wide transformation activity that's been going on for about 2 years now. We have obviously developed software through the entire 20-year life of the company. But the way we've looked at monetizing our software has changed over the last couple of years. And in addition to that, we've become obviously more aware, like every equipment manufacturer, about the inflection of cloud and how cloud changes everything. So cloud, both in its public form and its private form, and there's a special kind of private cloud that's of special interest to Juniper, which we call telco cloud. And obviously the big telecom service providers are using virtualization technologies to transform the operations of their networks. And so for us, the consequences of all this change and the inflection of cloud is all the different environments that our software products can run on, how those software products contribute as part of a hardware, software, and services solution, especially in the case of hybrid cloud, for example, where a customer may have a traditional Juniper hardware device on their premise, but they may have a software security or routing product in a public cloud. So that's a solution that includes both traditional products and new products. So all those different environments where our software products can run on and the transformation our own customers are going through is impacting the way we think about our business model. In addition to that, all the different public cloud environments have changed the way the whole world thinks about revenue models. And the shift to subscription, the shift to usage-based models are very different motions for a hardware equipment company, and we have to align to those so we're serving our customers in the marketplace.
So when you say, talked about cloud and telco cloud and different iterations of cloud, why specifically is customer adoption of cloud driving you to investigate monetization, different ways of monetizing software? So what's the connection? I think we all know public cloud services tend to be subscription, but for things like private cloud and telco cloud, how do those explicitly drive you to think differently about how you monetize?
So perhaps a little reflection on Juniper's history and Juniper's journey provides some good context here. So when Juniper started its journey 20 years ago, in the late 1990s, the internet was literally on the verge of collapse because there weren't scalable, reliable, high-performance routers. And Juniper came to marketplace with an ASIC-based technology and some specific techniques around those ASICs that created a step function improvement in performance of networking equipment. There was another problem related to the internet, which was the reliability of the internet, and that had to do with the software that was running on hardware. And one of the innovations Juniper had was to provide a modular software operating system. The combination of that innovation in software and that innovation in hardware was really the value proposition of the company, and delivering an integrated solution that solved the complexity across both the data plane and the control plane was what made Juniper successful. So all our business processes and systems and the way we monetize are wrapped around that idea of an integrated offering. So cloud changes that, because cloud creates a virtual layer between the physical infrastructure and the application layer. So as you get virtual workloads appearing on public cloud and private cloud and telco cloud, you need virtual networking offerings. And those virtual network offerings are going to be sold separately from the hardware platforms. So now we have to shift from this mindset of how do we have a very tightly coupled integrated offering, both from a productization point of view and a business model point of view, to the idea that approach will be good in some environments, but in the virtual environments, we need to think about the business models that apply to the virtual network offerings. So for us as a company, we really have three opportunities in the cloud transformation. We have the traditional opportunity in the physical WAN infrastructure. We have the opportunity in the new cloud physical infrastructure, but we also have an opportunity in the virtual layer that spans both the cloud and the wide area network.
Great. I really like how you're talking about in terms of opportunities.
Right.
I think framing the discussion in that way is really, really meaningful because these opportunities present challenges in the transition, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we go, I wanted to talk a little bit about cloud because you mentioned the importance of cloud and as a driver. I'm so much louder when I face this way. I think it has to do with the microphone. Sorry if you couldn't hear me before. The importance of cloud in changing some of these business model shifts. And I just wanted to share some data from IDC's Cloud View survey. It's about a 12,000 sample size survey that we do every year around the world to try to understand why people are shifting to cloud. And cloud is definitely fueling a lot of these business model changes, not only, of course, in the software producer space, but also more broadly in hardware and devices and extending out to manufacturing and healthcare and energy and so many other businesses where the connectivity provided by cloud and the ability to meter and track and to better understand and interact with your customers based on their customer experience is incredibly meaningful. And we hear from many of our enterprise clients that moving to cloud is a strategic imperative for their organizations. And this is the latest that we have on kind of why people are shifting to cloud. And it really shows an increase in maturity in the types of organizations or in the way that organizations are thinking about their cloud strategies. So this is not showing the providers or the producers. These are the purchasers of technologies and services, and IT and line of business respondents are included in this survey. So it's not only the people that are running the operations within the organization, but also the people that are running the business units that are looking for really important access to technology to make things better for themselves. And one of the things that I wanted to show is a difference between straight out budget and more strategic productivity. So there's reasons why people move to cloud from I'd like to reduce my IT budget. And digital transformation, obviously another really big trend that we talk a lot about is organizations looking to become more digital and how they automate parts of their operations inside their processes, inside their organization, but also how they interact with customers. And everything in the what you see here in the beige is very much on the improved productivity side as opposed to reduce cost side. So lots of different drivers why people would move to cloud. The other point that I want to make is that cloud is several different clouds. And many of you in the audience may know this. Well, what kind of cloud are you talking about? Are you talking about public cloud, the classic software as a service? Are you talking about private cloud? Are you talking about some notion of hybrid cloud? And what this slide shows is a budget expectations both currently and going forward for, I think it's 11,000 worldwide IT and line of business organizations for the various flavors of cloud. And there are a few important takeaways from this slide. The one is that there's a lot of deployment on-house in kind of traditional IT today as compared to at a provider site. And by provider site, we would include classic software as a service as well as managed cloud. So some managed service provider is running a cloud environment for you and you're shifting your software into that environment to take advantage of the cloud and cloud environment. About 7.8% today is associated with private cloud, so workloads running in private clouds within the enterprise. A big shift that we see in the next 24 months, which has a lot of implications for licensing, for sure, is a shift from traditional on-premise to either outsourced public cloud or outsourced private cloud at a provider site. So there'll be a lot more external to the enterprise, external to the end user organization's IT environment a lot more workloads running there. Also increased adoption of public cloud. So a question that I get asked often, are people really shifting to the cloud? How much is really shifting to the cloud? And at IDC, we have a myriad of data showing all different types of workloads and various penetrations and maturity levels for cloud in those various types of workloads. I just wanted to kind of give you a high-level summary because cloud is so important to this discussion with Mark and probably also important to your own thinking about your shifts, and I'm sure that we'll talk more about cloud and this topic. One of the big things that cloud has really changed, and I think this cloud has been one of the drivers. When Shlomo, when you talked about the now economy, I think our expectations have changed around timeliness and customer experience, in part because of cloud. I think mobility is another driver, right? A lot of these services that you mentioned wouldn't really be possible if we didn't have computers in the palm of our hands all the time, and not just technology people, everyone. So the democratization of technology is another driver, but just the increasing levels of expectation around customer experience, how easy it is to get access to the technology that we need, how much more the provider of the technology or service plays a role in making sure that the customer sees value and business models that kind of put skin in the game for the providers around that value. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit, Mark, about how customer experience and maybe rising expectations for customer experience has factored into some of the changes that Juniper's been making around software monetization.
Yeah, so customer experience is definitely very important to us. There's lots of expressions about what economy we're in. There's the now economy. I'm involved in some other work at the moment where there's an expression of the algorithm economy, and that has to do with what's happening in AI and machine learning, what have you. But there's also the recurring revenue economy, right? So if you go to a recurring revenue base, what's really important is that customers keep coming back, that they're actually consuming your software and they want to keep consuming it. So customer experience becomes a very important pivot in ensuring you can make that shift to a recurring model. And there's lots of aspects to the customer experience. There's the administrative aspects to any portals you might provide. It's the extent to which you can provide an automated experience. So when we think about the things that we're trying to solve for, we're trying to remove frictions, both in the terms of the commercial arrangements, and we're trying to remove frictions in our customers' operations as well as our own operations. And all those things ultimately become part of the customer experience.
And as you talk through it, it seems just matter of fact and simple. Oh yeah, we're just going to move the frictions, and we'll remove the frictions inside. We'll remove the. That's all really like meaty, complicated stuff to do. I mean, could you double click into a little bit, maybe within your own organization? What are some of those frictions that you encounter, and how does a company? What does a company need to do in order to move through that?
So I think, frictions or the discussion can be broken into, two different buckets. There's the generic frictions of any large company that's been around for 20 years, and then there's the Juniper-specific frictions. So if I start with the Juniper-specific frictions, we're a company that has always won in the marketplace through having the best innovation in our products, right? And that gives the company a certain focus and a certain orientation in what it thinks is important, and it's a very engineering and to some extent sales-centric company, right? And a lot of transformation is around business processes and systems, right? So we have to kind of make that pivot and build the awareness that side of the company is really important in making this shift. So that's a Juniper-specific thing, and it's not a criticism per se, because for anybody who's obviously worn a strategy hat and you've worn all the strategy literature, there's lots of different ways to win in the marketplace, and different companies make choices. Some companies make the choice to be the lowest price provider, and they have a lot of focus on operations, for example. Some companies decide to differentiate through customer intimacy. We're a company that chooses by strategy to focus through product innovation. So that's the main focus of the company. And then if you look at generic things, if you look at the way a business model evolves over 20 years, and you look at the alignment of activities, of processes, of systems, of investments, of decision making, you see that these things get more complicated and entrenched over a long period of time. And in any kind of thought process, when you think about change, you have to deal with, well, there's a couple of things you have to deal with. You have to deal with the things that are already not working, in addition to the change that you're trying to provide. But you also have to deal with the assumptions that are explicitly stated in your systems and processes, as well as you have to some extent discover the assumptions that are not explicitly stated but are in people's heads because they've been doing the same thing for 20 years and they have a certain understanding about how important that is to the value proposition of the company. So understanding where all those kind of landmines sit in a company and where all those assumptions are and discovering those assumptions is a journey.
Great. So I'm going to pull up a slide, your slide here, because you just kind of, a good segue into the different types of issues and the nuts and bolts of the change. And I wonder if you could kind of talk through or set this slide up a bit for the folks in the room, you know, what you're seeing and you know, the different types of models that are evolving or as you make this transformation.
So what this slide is trying to set up is a conversation about, you know, what you necessarily focus on in the short term versus what's the long-term journey you have to focus on. And in the short term, there are three things that are very tightly coupled. There's the structure of the models. In Juniper, we call those revenue models, but other people might call them offering models. So, and from a finance perspective, you might hear a term like performance obligations. What are the components that are you putting into a single SKU? And in the case of, say, subscription, that's a big change for a lot of companies because you're packaging both a product component and a support component. And that has implications, you know, end-to-end across the company. So you have to deal with that level of change. And then there's a level of change around pricing models. So in our case, we have both perpetual and subscription offerings. That creates a complication, and that complication is driven by the fact that we target multiple buying centers. We target buying centers that have a traditional CapEx orientation in their budget structure. And we also target IT buying centers that are more comfortable with you know, cloud models and subscription models. So then the conversation goes from beyond the conversation about what's the structure of the offering to what's the relative pricing on a TCO basis between the different offerings you have. And that discussion is not just about list pricing, it's about how discounting affects the net pricing, it's about your non-standard pricing processes. So those things become very coupled. And then licensing technology plays into both those discussions to some extent, but certainly on the structure side, where you're trying to create an environment where you know how software is being used, where you have some set of processes wrapped around the fact that one offering is perpetual and one offering is term-based. So licensing technology provides a basic systems and process infrastructure for realizing those different offer structures.
So just before I have another question for you, but I just want to check in with the audience and see if there are any questions that anyone has that have come up. Yes, go ahead in the front. Yeah.
Most important aspect of what should be done by companies like yours, but anyone else, is the metrology, the secret metrology of how find out how the customers are using this internal for cost accounting, budgeting for future versus actual revenue realization. What are the secrets of metrology hooks that you have?
I'm sorry, I'm not capturing that word that you're saying.
Metrology is metering.
Oh, okay.
The subject of metering is called metrology, or measurement is metrology.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of nuances in that space. Some of them are technological. Some of them are changing your products so they produce the kind of information you need. And then there is the customer experience around reporting that. But there's also legal issues and compliance issues. So we have a range of competitors in our space, and they take a different approach on the legal front, for example. There's the question of, are you only going to do metering when the customer gives you permission to? Are you going to do it automatically? Is it opt-in or opt-out? So there's a wide range of impacts across the company in finance, legal, compliance, and technology.
So I guess on the technology topic, thank you for your question. It kind of segues into what I was going to ask, which is around the licensing technology specifically. So prior to making this business model change with software monetization, did you have licensing technology in place, or is this something that you have looked more closely at or implemented once Juniper decided, look, we're going to monetize the software?
We had lots of licensing technology implemented. In fact, we had 23 different key generators, and we had a wide range of different approaches from different product groups and product managers, and obviously acquisitions play into this dynamic as well. So part of this effort, which is once again related to customer experience, is can we kind of create a set of standard models and a standard way of doing things? So beyond that kind of need to really get to a better customer experience, there's also different capabilities that we're adding with the technology. We're getting to a much more capable customer and channel portal with our relationship with Gemalto and SafeNet. And we also want to go beyond today's experience to a more automated experience for our customer operation. And then ultimately, if you look to the future, as usage-based models become more common and more popular, there is going to be an interesting set of conversations in the marketplace about, does that fundamentally change the nature of licensing? Do you not have the kind of activation motion you have today, or do you just kind of allow people to download software and then just bill them based on how they're using it? Now that's not a simple conversation either, because the legal team would say, a customer can't use software until they've accepted a certain set of terms and conditions. So all those things have to be thought through. But I think in the foundation of technology that we're putting in place today, we're looking forward to the future where usage-based models are much more common than they are today.
Okay. And you talked about how maybe things were done in the past. Culturally, did your organization need to make a shift from maybe product management having a lot of autonomy around pricing and packaging and technology to more of a centralized team as you're looking to standardize? And what has that been like, I guess, in changing internal people's expectations around how decisions are made for pricing and packaging software?
So Juniper as a company has traditionally dealt with very large telecom companies. And in that engagement with them, we've often had sales cycles that were 12 months or 18 months long. And therefore, they're very intimate relationships. And there's a lot of back and forth in terms of negotiating terms and conditions and how we engage and how we operate. And because of that basic dynamic, we have a culture that's very open to the idea of exceptions and doing things differently for different customers. So that obviously does create friction with the idea of customer experience and operational efficiency. So it's an issue that we're working through. In our particular company, the strategy group had a role in establishing and aligning across the CEO staff what the initial revenue models would be and the licensing framework. As the imperative has evolved, the operations groups are starting to play a much bigger role and an important role. The finance group has a role in pricing, and the PLMs, also have a role. So you have 3 or 4 different players in this equation that you have to solve across and try to get the right answer.
Excellent. And I guess another question from a process perspective: how do you balance flexibility? I think there are probably a lot of people in this room that are looking to be more flexible and have more flexible business models, with the fact that a lot of times flexibility can lead to complexity. So how do you offer flexibility in the way that you price and package or monetize software, while at the same time maintaining some level of simplicity, and you make it easier for customers to figure out how to buy, what they've bought, what they've used, all of those types of things?
Yeah, so the way I talk about it internally in the company is I try to draw a distinction, which is very subtle and maybe not easy to understand, between what I call trivial change and material change. And to me, the things that are in the bucket of trivial change is when you have two PLMs sitting in cubicles next to each other, but they just don't talk to each other and agree on a common model. And that's, to me, that's bad variation that creates a lot of problems across the entire company and the customer experience. On the other hand, if you're, as a company, developing a different value proposition, targeting a different market, targeting a different buying center, you might have to make change or add a new model that is relevant to that buying center, and I consider that material change. So I think that's the way I kind of frame it in my head, and that's the kind of discussion that I try to drive inside the company. Let's eliminate the variations that are caused because people just won't talk to each other and align on a model. But let's be open to the things that we have to do to be successful in the marketplace and be market-driven.
Okay, great. And then from a technology perspective, you talk about licensing technology on this slide, and we've talked about it a bit. How do you think licensing technology adds value for your customers, or what do your customers see as far as value from licensing technology? How does that enhance or improve their customer experience, as an example?
So first, I should probably start by talking about, how do I frame success in my mind, right? And to me, the reoccurring dream I have is that Carolyn from our finance group, she walks in my office one day and she says, "Mark, I'm so proud that we're monetizing our software to the maximum extent possible." And in the same day, a customer calls me up and says, "There's absolutely no friction in my operations environment for your software." Now, the reality is you have to make trade-offs on those spectrums of aspirations between maximizing your monetization and creating a great customer experience. But in terms of the capabilities that we're trying to achieve with our licensing technology, I put them in the following buckets. Some of them are terms that people are familiar with. So obviously the idea of activation is making sure that a common software image is being used in the way that a customer is licensed to use it. There's measurement, which is important across all the offering models and revenue models. Whether you're in a true-up motion or a post-paid usage motion, you want to have good measurement. You want to have reporting that gives both Juniper and the customer the same view of what usage is actually happening. And you want to have self-serve and automated administration functions. So those are the main capabilities that we're trying to do, trying to get to that navigate that tension between monetization and customer experience.
Excellent. And is there any piece of that, you mentioned a partner portal, what role do partners play in the Juniper ecosystem, and how are you also enabling partners to come along with you in this transition?
So just like we have many different types of customers and buying centers, we have a wide range of partners, from very large distributors to direct resellers and the resellers our distributors use. And we also have low-touch resellers. And solving across all those different types of motions is something we have to pay a lot of attention to. We have to understand the ways in which those different types of partners create value in their own ecosystem, the way they generate profit for themselves. Obviously, some partners generate profit by having high volume on a low margin. Other partners generate profit by having very advanced services and a very complicated engagement with their resellers. And we have to think about all those things, and we have to understand not only how they create profit for themselves, but what are the systems and processes they have themselves. And sometimes in partner motions, you find a reseller relying a lot on a distributor from a systems and process point of view. and you have to understand those kinds of engagements. So the two fundamentals are the systems and processes of your partners, and in what way is the change you're making impacting that. But you also have to think at a business level in terms of how do they generate profit.
Great, great. Any other questions before we start to wrap up a bit?
May I introduce an important depth called tribology studies for you to be able to do metrology and then offering, pricing, and licensing technology should be based on customer experience at the point of customer experience called tribology study. I don't think it's done at all in the industry. Very, very important.
Okay, thank you. And any questions?
So a quick question.
Yes.
How do you do the transformation on the sales compensation side? Because you're going from a perpetual upfront sales comp model to a ratable model, right?
So there's a lot.
Just repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. So the opinion, the question was how are we dealing with sales compensation? Because the view is the proposition that was put forward was that a perpetual model is upfront and a subscription model is ratable. So currently on the subscription side, we're taking a full contract lifetime approach to the compensation model. We're early on in terms of the adoption of subscription in our customer base, and that approach may change over time. Obviously, from a finance perspective, once you get a large install base of subscription offerings, you have the potential to create a large gap between the costs you're incurring and the way you're recognizing revenue. We may have to visit that. But in terms of stimulating the adoption of subscription licenses and asking the sales force to buy in it, we've taken the approach of compensating on full-term value.
Great. Anything else?
Yeah, just
Okay.
one quick question.
Sure.
If I could. Can you expand a little bit on alternative ways to evaluate deals?
Evaluate deal?
Yeah, as you said, the gross margin opportunity, that's not a good evaluation model. So when you made the transition, how did you replace that valuation?
So let me kind of repeat the question and kind of set up the challenge that you're referring to. So in an equipment company like Juniper Networks, one of the fundamental metrics that the Wall Street looks at and that we look at is what is our gross margin. And as the gentleman is implying, gross margin is a function of revenue minus hardware cost essentially. And that's important to the street and the way we think about our business, because if you have a high gross margin, that means your customers have a high willingness to pay for the innovation you're delivering to the marketplace. In the case of software, there's very little cost component. So then you have to think about, you can't use the old rule of thumb that if it's 65% or 70%, it's a good deal or it's a bad deal. You have to think about a different approach. So certainly in the case of where we are today as a company, the way we're approaching that is by changing our discounting rules around our software. And we're really measuring the goodness of a deal based on what's the discount level. So we have a much different discount approach for software than we did for hardware. And as a way of creating a bit of a break against that basic tension where customers and sales forces might have the view that there's no downside to giving away software for free because there's no explicit cost from each instance of software. But I think over time, part of the maturation of the company will to have a better understanding about the lifetime cost of software and apply that to the lifetime revenue opportunity. That said, just a little nuance on that fact, we do license in technology, and some of that technology has royalty payments. That does create a COGS issue, and we do have to solve for that sometimes.
Great. That was kind of a nice wrap up. I was going to ask you to wrap up, but I feel like you kind of did in that answer there. That was really good kind of words to live by at the end there. And I just wanted to leave all of you with a summary slide. I'm not going to talk through all of the points in the interest of time, but in fact, we already have talked through all of these points throughout the course of the discussion. So this is really just kind of putting a fine point on some of the different elements of what we talked about here during this discussion, and thank you very much for your time and for your questions, and look forward to interacting with some of you either today or at another time. So thank you.